Hello, my name is Elaine Horn, and today we will be looking at Cisco Academy's Introduction to Cybersecurity, version 2.1, Chapter 3, Protecting Your Data and Privacy. This particular chapter does have 4 labs, and depending on how in depth you want to go into this chapter could take multiple days to complete, or if you only wanted to do a couple of the labs, you could complete the chapter in a couple days. So there's going to be a lot of choices for you to make in this chapter, and part of the choices you make will probably be built around what your background is in cybersecurity. There's a lot of concepts in this chapter that if you know cybersecurity already, if you've taught cybersecurity before and you know some cryptography and information about VPN, you might want to go a little deeper into this chapter. If not, you could just wait till the students get ready to study the cybersecurity essentials to go into more detail for a lot of the information that's in this chapter. So first of all, let's just break out of the PowerPoint for a few minutes here, and let's look at the labs. So the first lab is concentrating on creating and storing strong passwords. So they will give them some recommendations for passwords. So you'll see down here that they're recommendations for password. If you keep going, you're going to notice that they will also give them some sites that they can look at that will generate passwords for them if they would like to use a web browser or another site to do that. So you'll see that there are some choices there. And then they also look at an application called LastPass. And LastPass is a application that will store your usernames and passwords for you. I use LastPass. When you look up in my menu bar right now, you're going to notice LastPass is this little icon up here. So if I forget a username or a password, I can go in there to look. Or normally LastPass will save them for me and automatically complete username and passwords for me when I go to a password protected site. Notice it finishes up with a great conclusion. So basically it says, what is a strong password then? Because we've studied everything up through here. And notice it says, choose a password you can remember, choose a password that someone else cannot associate with you, choose different passwords and never use the same password for different services. And complex passwords are okay as long as it does not become harder to remember. So that's the first lab that's in the chapter. They also have a lab on backing up data to external storage. There'll be some things in this lab that you do with Windows. Notice they're giving us information for Windows 7, Windows 8.1. And the way to do it in Windows 10 should be very similar. They'll talk about backing up a remote disk, backing up to a remote disk, or possibly backing up data to the cloud. Now, when you look at this particular lab, notice they want you to access Dropbox. That might be an issue in your educational institution, so that's something that you would want to check before completing this lab. They also do some things with OneDrive, which is part of Microsoft Outlook. So that might be an issue there as well. So this is a lab that is good because you want to talk about backing up all of your data. But parts of it may have to be modified due to the fact that your school is not going to allow you to access Dropbox in the classroom. This is one of my favorite labs because notice what they're going to do here. They're going to use a point system, and what they're going to have everybody do in the classroom is they have to answer one of these questions. And notice the first question, what kind of information do you share with social media sites? And notice if you answer everything, you're automatically going to get 3 points. Now in this particular game, 3 points is not good. So you want to be able to score no points. So nothing, I do not use social media. So the higher number of points you score on this survey, if you score 18 or more, you're very unsafe online and will be compromised. So this will give the students something to think about. This particular lab could be used with any audience, along with the one on passwords that could be used with any audience as well. So you could do a, maybe at a workshop, you would want to do something on creating and storing strong passwords, and the same thing with this risky online behavior. Who owns your data? This is a nice one too, because notice they're going to go through each one of these sites, which we know are very popular, and they're going to look at the data privacy laws that are in here, or the terms of services of each one of these data privacies. You could have students possibly do this as pairs. Would be a good one to do with pairs. So that's to look at the lab. So notice those will take you some time. If you decide to do all 4 of these labs, it will take you some time to get through those with students. Let me go back to the PowerPoint. So there's 2 sections in this chapter. Notice they sound fairly easy. It just depends on how deep you dive into each one of them as to how long it will take you to cover the material. This chapter would be just fine if you just included a couple of those labs and went through the information that's in the coursework. So the first section you're going to notice is under protecting your computing devices. And give me just a second. I seem to have misplaced myself here. Okay, now I'm good. So the first thing you want to do when you're protecting your computing devices is keep your firewall on. And in this particular chapter, we're going to break out of it in just a little bit because they will show us how to make sure that the firewall is turned on in the Windows operating system and also in the Mac operating system. So we'll take a look at that in just a second. Next thing you need to do is make sure you run antivirus or anti-spyware software. So we will take a look at some of the most popular antivirus and anti-spyware software. And then when it says manage your operating system in your browsers, what's important about that is to make sure that you download and install the latest software patches and security updates. And you really don't want to run older operating systems such as Windows 7. And then protect all of your devices. So your phones, your computers, everything that you have, all your different accounts that you have, make sure that they are password protected. Do not forget to password protect all your IoT devices. Make sure you change the default password. That's big. And make sure you encrypt the data if you know how, or if you can figure out how. And we're going to look at that as well. So let's break out of here for just a little bit. So there are links in the curriculum that will take a student to this site where it'll show them how to turn Windows Defender Firewall on or off. So you're going to notice they give them the steps by clicking at the Start button, then going to Settings, Update and Security, Windows Security. So they take them right through that on how to turn it on. Now don't forget, this might be something that the students don't have access to, so you may need some practice computers that are offline to be able to see these settings. They also, in the curriculum, they will show you how to do this with a Mac operating system as well, so OS X. And then towards the end of that particular section, they will also point you to an application called Shodan. And notice this is a search engine for internet-connected devices. You will be able to show this to your students, but if you want the full capability of this, you will need to buy it. But we can look at just a few things. So notice it says you can explore the Internet of Things. So use it to discover which of your devices are connected to the Internet, where they are located, and who is using them. That would be important. You can monitor network security, keep track of all the computers on your network. And then over here it says see the big picture. Websites are just one part of the Internet. There are power plants, smart TVs, refrigerator, and much more that can be found with this. And then this one is who is using your product. So if you have a product and you want to see who's using it, you could use this part of this. But again, to get full capabilities of this, you do have to buy it. There is something down here that's kind of interesting because notice it says that they have servers located around the world that crawl the Internet 24/7 to provide the latest Internet intelligence. So who buys smart TV, which countries are building the most wind farms, what companies are affected by the heartbleed. So heartbleed, I'm just going to go ahead and click on this sample report. And basically this is showing you the devices that are vulnerable to this heartbleed exploit. And if you don't, this would be a time if you wanted to have students do some research on heartbleed, they could do that. If you are a beginning teacher for Introduction to Cybersecurity, you may not want to go this deep. You may just want to stop where just showing them the Shodan site and not even worried about going here. So if you're a beginning cybersecurity teacher, this isn't something that you would have to do right now. But if you are experienced, you're going to notice you could go into Heartbleed. So you could look and see this is heartbleed.com. So, and notice it says the Heartbleed bug allows anyone on the Internet to read the memory of the systems protected by the vulnerable versions of the OpenSSL software. So you immediately go to OpenSSL software. So then there would be a discussion about what that was. So what is OpenSSL? And you could research that as well. So here's Wikipedia information on that. So notice it's a software library for applications that secure communications over computer networks against eavesdropping or need to identify the party at the other end. It's something that's used by internet servers, including the majority of the HTTPS websites. So you're going to notice you can tell if it's an HTTPS website by looking up here. So any of those types of websites were vulnerable to this heartbleed. And if this is something that you want to study more with your students at this point, you could do some more research on OpenSSL. You could do some more research on Heartbleed, but it would be kind of up to you whether you wanted to go that deep with them or not. That would be your choice. As far as antiviruses are concerned, you're going to notice that there's a lot of different antivirus software out there. Some of them that you probably have heard of before is McAfee, Norton. So those are the ones that you may have heard of before. Kaspersky. But it's very important that the students know that they need to run an antivirus, anti-spyware software. And notice most of these, when you look down through them, it'll say a very fast antivirus which removes all the viruses, malware, adware, and spyware, includes internet security, ransomware, and phishing protection. And notice this one is free. Okay. Now we talked about that Shogun and how it can track your internet devices, especially your IoT devices. I actually have something on my computer, and I should edit this a little bit, so give me just a second here. Having trouble to getting this to do what I want it to do. So just give me a second. Okay. So if you notice, I am running a Netgear Nighthawk wireless access point. And when I look at this, first of all, we're going to get ready to talk about SSIDs. So we'll get back to that in just a second. So we'll return to the screen in a little bit. But when I do attach devices, and it's asking for my username and my password, and when you look down through here, notice you will see some of the devices that I have in my house. And like this is one of our newest ones. This is our garage door opener. So you're going to notice there's quite a few of them in here. So these are IoT devices that I own, and what would be important is for me to always kind of check to make sure that these are ones that are mine and nobody else is connecting to my network. Okay, let's go back to the PowerPoint. So the next screen you're going to notice is talking about using wireless network safely. So there's a preset SSID, that stands for Service Set Identifier, and there's a default administrative passwords on your Wi-Fi router. You should always change those. So change those, and you can, if you want to, you do not have to enable the SSID broadcast. You can disable that. So the only way that somebody can connect to your wireless network is if they know what the name of the SSID is as well as the password. You should encrypt, and what they're suggesting here is use WPA2. But it also tells you to make sure that you're aware that WPA2 did have a security flaw called crack, which allowed an intruder to break the encryption between wireless routers and clients. So if it broke the encryption, that means it could read things. So even though it was encrypted, it was scrambled, they found a way to break that encryption. And it spends some time in this particular section reminding you to use caution when using public Wi-Fi hotspots. You probably shouldn't be accessing your bank information on a public Wi-Fi hotspot. They do, if you did want to do that, you should look at something called a VPN tunnel, because that could prevent eavesdropping, because VPN is going to give you a private tunnel for you to complete your work in. And notice it says to turn off Bluetooth when not in use, because Bluetooth gives another way for hackers to possibly sniff what's in your network. Again, we're going to come out of the PowerPoint for just a second. And I think I had, let's see here, make this, let's go back here for just a second, because what I wanted to do is go back up here to wireless. And notice under security options on my particular wireless device, I do have WPA2 PSK pre-shared key. I do have that selected. Notice there were other options. And notice I am enabling my SSID broadcast. And notice I've pretty much just left it at the default, which is not a good thing. And then let's see if there's any. I don't want to go into there. I have changed the default password. So I have changed the default password. And let's go into here. Let me make this screen just a little bigger. This is just a little article from PCWorld.com. And they did an article on here's what an eavesdropper sees when you use an unsecured Wi-Fi hotspot. So this is something that you could use with your students. Again, you wouldn't have to use this particular one. This is just one. When I Googled, I found this. And this is kind of showing the students. It says this particular, it says, I parked myself at my local coffee shop the other day to soak up the airwaves and see what I could see. My intent wasn't to hack anyone's computer, but just to listen. It's similar to listening in on someone's CB or walkie-talkie radio conversation. Wi-Fi's operate on public airways that anyone can tune into. So that's something that students need to remember, and that's a good analogy right there. This particular person sounds like they were using a packet sniffer of some sort. Says I opened my laptop at the coffee shop and began capturing Wi-Fi signals called 802.11 packets with the help of a free trial of a wireless network analyzer. Don't forget we've talked about Wireshark earlier in the course. The packets appeared on the screen in real time as they were captured more quickly than I could read them, so I stopped capturing after a few minutes to analyze what I had vacuumed up. So when you look down here, they'll show you some of the packets that were captured. Notice wherever they've got the red at is where the username and the password. So they automatically started capturing this. It says I first searched for packets containing HTML code to see which websites other hotspots users were using. So I didn't capture anything interesting, so I visited my own website on my smartphone. And when you keep going down through here, it'll show you some other screenshots of information that was captured. This is, notice it kind of shows them what they were accessing. And this is a good little lesson here because basically it says if you use FTP, which is a file transfer protocol to download, upload, or share files, you should definitely avoid connecting to them over unsecured hotspots. They use unencrypted connections, and when you look at what they've captured there, again, we can see usernames and passwords. Here's a little bit more information. Let me see if I picked one out here. I did. About crack, and there is also one in the curriculum. So if you're reading the curriculum, they have a link to this crack attack as well. And again, this is part of the curriculum when they're going over this, if this is something that you don't want to go in detail, because maybe when you start reading through this, you're going to notice you would have to have some background in computer networking before you would understand what a 3 or a 4-way handshake was. So if you didn't want to cover this in any detail, that would be fine in this particular course. And let's see what else. I thought, yeah, I don't see it right now. In here, in this particular section is where they also talk about VPN tunnels. I believe, let's see, they do have a hot link here. Here's a hot link for the crack. And then I would also do some work. I would Google some information about VPN tunnels and talk to students about VPN tunnels at this point as well. So as you'll notice, you can spend a great amount of time on this particular section of the curriculum, or you could just spend as little time as you would like. So again, this time they're talking about using unique passwords for each online account. We saw this in previous chapters, that if you use the same password on every online account, if they get into one, they can get into all of them. And you never know when you're using an application that does not encrypt your passwords. So that's why this gets really important. Don't forget, I had mentioned earlier in one of the other recordings that NIST is saying now that sometimes it's better to use phrases instead of just words. So phrases will be a little easier for you to remember. You can still mix them up with the special characters. So you can mix them up with the special characters, make them harder for someone to guess. But they'll be easier for you to remember, and they'll also be harder to crack. So they'll be harder to crack as well. And that's what they're talking about here, is use a passphrase rather than just a simple password. And here's those new NIST guidelines. Don't forget, you will follow up this particular chapter section of the curriculum. So you'll follow up this part with this lab that we've already talked about. And again, if you wanted to do this as a workshop for peers or for other classes, and you could actually have your students present this to other classes as well. So it'd be a great lesson for all. Here they're reminding you that we do need to encrypt our data. So you're getting ready to send something. So you've got a sender and a receiver. You're trying to send something. You want to make sure that all of that is encrypted. And encrypted data should only be read with the secret key or the password. And by encrypting it, you're going to scramble it up so only prevent unauthorized users from reading the content. In this particular chapter, they will tell you how to show you how to encrypt. If you wanted to encrypt a file using Microsoft, so they will show it in that, and they will also show you if you wanted to encrypt using the Mac OS as well. This is where they're talking about backing up your data. When they say NAS, that stands for Network Attached Storage. Could be an external hard drive, CD, DVDs, thumb drives, those old-fashioned tapes. I don't think anybody's using those anymore. Or cloud storage services such as AWS. AWS is Amazon Web Services. And then there is a lab to follow up that. And then they do in this chapter talk about deleting your data permanently. So you can put it in the trash, you can empty your trash can. It's still on your hard drive somewhere. So if you really want to remove sensitive files completely, SDelete is for Microsoft. Secure Empty Trash is for Mac OS X. And then also Shred is for Linux. So there are tools that will let you permanently delete data from your hard drives. And they remind you, once you permanently delete it, it's not uncommon for people to try to just destroy that storage device. So you could take a hammer to it if you wanted to. Now, here's the tricky part, is if we've stored information out on the cloud, we also have to delete the online versions. So that's why they follow this particular chapter up with who owns your data. So can you, if you put it somewhere, such as Google, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, how can you get it off of there? So how do you remove it permanently from those particular sites? Two-factor authentication just means to log in or to access. Like in this case, they're talking about the ATM machine. You're going to need more than just one fact. So you might need your username or your password or your PIN. And like when we're using the ATM, we have that card that we use as well that identifies us. So you're going to have more than one thing that's needed so that you can log in to whatever it is you're trying to access. And it is possible these days that it might be a fingerprint or a palm print or facial or voice recognition. And I'm going to show you a sample of this in a little bit, but Open Authorization 2.0 allows an end user's credentials to access third-party applications without exposing the user's password. So we have here someone that's trying to access the web app XYZ, but instead of going directly to that web app XYZ and getting authorization, what it's going to do is it's going to go to some other servers that are for open authorization, and it's going to log in through those. Tokens are going to be issued, accessed, and they'd access the data, so it doesn't go directly for authentication and authorization. It goes towards those other servers first, and then you can access the servers. I've got a little demonstration of that in just a second. And finally, this chapter will end up with something that you could spend hours talking to your students about. Do not share too much information on social media. And it gives you some examples of things that you should not share. And don't forget, if they're using Facebook, they can go into their privacy and they can check off that those types of information is not allowed to be shared. And they should check all their social media settings. So if they're using Instagram, the same type of thing. This is interesting because if your email is like sending a postcard, any copies of the email can be read by anyone with access. Emails pass along different services, but there are private browsers mode that you can use to prevent others from gathering information about your online activities. And we'll look at Google Chrome's incognito in just a second. This is that survey that I talked about where you will gain points. And that's the end of that chapter. So let me just go out here for a second and look at some of the other things that I bookmarked so we could look at. So here's a good example. If you're going to notice, this is just where I'm trying to log into Facebook. I'm going to hit login right here. And notice it's going to tell me that I've entered an old password. Notice it tells me that I can log in with Google. So this means that I'm using another site. So I'm going to another site to authenticate myself to get into Facebook. This is bad, so please tell students this is probably not a good idea. But I just wanted to demonstrate that one real quick. And if you tell students just kind of watch for it, they'll see it more often than not these days, where you'll have an option when you're trying to log into a site to log in with another application. I always want to go back to this National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, because these are where, as educators, we're supposed to follow these guidelines. This is always something that you could share with students, any of the NIST guidelines that you might find. And notice on this particular page, you can even type in a password and they will check the strength of it for you. Now, the password cracker, those password generators that we saw, they will do that on there as well. But this is a site that they would do that if you wanted them to as well. So you can type in a password and you can just kind of check to see if it's weak or if it's strong. So you're going to notice when I got to the point where it got very strong is when I started entering numbers and other characters, not just letters. This is how you encrypt files on a Mac. So if they've got the information in the curriculum for encrypting files on Windows machines or Microsoft, so you can also find the methods for encrypting files on a Mac as well. I'm just looking here to see. I don't think I do. I thought maybe, but I do not. I thought maybe, yeah, I do. Let's kind of look at this. So you're going to notice it tells me open up disk utility, which I have done here. So this is my Mac. And then it says go to Applications, which I did. And it says once you get there, go to File. So let me go back over here for a second. So File, you're going to notice, you should go there, choose, go to Finder Applications. Once there, go to File and choose I may not be able to do this. We'll try it one more time. And if it doesn't work, we will end it here. Go to Finders, Applications, Utilities folder, which is where we're at. So open Disk Utility. So we'll open that. Let it wait for it to open. Okay, now that I've got the disk utility open, it's open here. It's also, we can see a menu bar up here on the top. I'm going to go to File, choose New Disk Image from Folder. So notice Image from Folder. I'm going to go into my desktop because there are some folders on there. And let's see, choose New Disk or notice it says Shift Command N will also get me there, so I could have used that. Select the folder you want to encrypt and then click Image. So we're going to click this folder right here. And now pick your encryption method. So if you go down here, you're going to notice that you'll see the encryption method right down here. So I can encrypt that entire folder. And again, your curriculum gives you information for doing that with Windows as well. And if you were using Linux, there's a way to do it for Linux. So there's a way to do that for all operating systems. This is the part with the private browser. So I'm using Google Chrome. And here's how simple it is to use the private browser. If I do Control-Shift-N, actually that didn't work because I'm using a Mac. I need the Apple Shift-N, and that's the private browser. And notice it says that other people who use this device won't see your activity. However, downloads and bookmarks will be saved. So that's what they call the private browser. So that would be a good thing to demonstrate with students. Depending on what browser you're using, you should be able to find the information that you need. Again, if you have any questions about this presentation, feel free to email me directly. And please don't let this chapter scare you. If you are new to cybersecurity, you might want to go directly through it, not spend too much time on some of the topics that we talked about until you get a little stronger at those. And don't forget, all of these topics will be reviewed in greater detail in the Cybersecurity Essentials recordings. So if you are new to all of this, before you teach this to students, you might want to take some time and take a peek at some of the recordings that are in Cybersecurity Essentials. That's all for now, so we're going to sign out. Bye.